In the unlikely event of a general alarm, you'd hear a siren. So in the unlikely event of a general alarm, you'd hear a siren. So please, the exits are straight, and then to the left, and you get outside of the building. You do not have to put your mask on, nor put to any adult acting as a child before leaving. Yes. And as you leave the exit, please take your belongings. If not, we'll share them amongst the staff. Do you speak Russian? If you don't speak Russian, make sure you have headsets. And I really want to thank the interpreters you have in German, English, French, and Russian. So we are on together to an impossible mission of finishing at 12 o'clock. You don't hear me? Okay. Thanks for the comment. But I don't know how I can deal with this. I think is the microphone functioning? Can you hear? Yeah? Okay. Dear family, dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished delegates and participants, Your Excellencies, ministers, ambassadors, Your Royal Majesty. It is my great pleasure, and I'm really proud of being with you today to moderate this session, the opening session of the Caux Forum, Strengthening Democracy, the Journey from Trauma to Trust. My name is Ignacio, and they generally call me Ignacio. As I'm the son of a diplomat, and my own professional experience has led me to value protocol matters and diplomatic etiquette. But in the Caux Palace, however, what is important for the hospitality for change, is to be extended to all in the same way, no matter. I wish you all a transformative experience during your stay in Caux. We have several hundreds of participants joining online. We have in Caux Palace, as I understand, probably something like 450 people. This theater hall having the capacity to welcome 385. There's still some empty chairs, and there's a spillover room in the main hall where people can watch on the screen. You're all coming from 72 countries. Such an incredible diversity in the room, and really a very, very warm welcome. You will find the program and the bios of the speakers on the application WHOVA. Some of you had the briefing on that last night. And to help frame the opening ceremony, we will have opening remarks by Jacqueline Coté, President of Initiatives of Change Switzerland, and by Gerald Pillay, President of Initiatives of Change International. And invite you, Gerald, to take the floor.
Well, good morning, everybody. It's a great joy to welcome you all to this meeting of the Initiatives of Change International here at Caux, Switzerland. And this year, the International Council was privileged to collaborate in a new way with our dear friends of the Initiative of Change at Caux. And so this is a partnership, and we're delighted with the close relationship we have. I and the International Council with Jacqueline Coté and her team, a very able and willing team, I must say. And it's so gratifying to see that we can work internationally and locally here in Caux together, and to see how directors Imad Karam and Ignacio Parker have such a good rapport between them. Thank you at the very outset to that team of volunteers who have been so busy for so many months behind the scenes, who may never get their names mentioned here, but let it be known that from our hearts we are very, very grateful. This would not have happened without you. May I welcome you all, delegates to the Global Assembly, which meets this weekend, honored guests from public life here in Switzerland and in many other countries present with us, speakers, contributors to the conferences, and those attending one or even both the forums over the next 10 days. Your presence and the organizations you represent are important to us and to our work as Initiatives of Change International. And your contribution to the dialogue over these next few days is crucial. For over 75 years, this wonderful place has been the source of inspiration and renewal for tens of thousands of people from all over the world. If these walls could speak, they would tell us many, many soulful stories of change, of how those who came up to the mountain house with intransigence and narrow-mindedness left with great friendships and lifelong solidarities across countries. They would tell us if our anger and hate were replaced by newfound respect for others and even respect for one's enemies. They will tell us stories of how bitterness was replaced by love, and how tears of hurt and tears of regret gave way to forgiveness and to healing. How self-righteousness was replaced by self-understanding, and our individual conflicts and animosity were replaced by a common purpose and a resolve to leave this place and change the world. When the first meetings took place here at Caux, those who attended were consumed by the trauma and the hurt of the World War and the bitter rivalry between neighboring countries in Europe. Those on both sides of the conflict lost so many people and inherited decades of suffering and distrust. Over 50 million people died in World War II, and a further 19 to 28 million died through war-related diseases and famine. War, my friends, brings no real victories, only hurt and division, and violence begets violence. And now we meet at Caux after a long period of closure because of the pandemic, when not just Europe and its allies, but the whole world virtually came to a standstill. Some 767 million people contracted COVID, and several thousand, some close to us, died. In fact, we are still counting the real loss. There's a whole investigation in the UK of exactly what went wrong. So during this time of social distancing and wearing of masks and protecting ourselves from others, we were asked to avoid each other, to isolate, and to keep distance. And that is why it is such a joy to see you and to be in one place in this room together. To meet now is a special celebration. To meet here at Caux is a symbol of renewal for the global community, and to see each other face to face and to eat together. This is a great blessing. A sign of our collegiality, and you're quite right, Ignacio, our familyhood. Collegium, from which we get the word collegiality, is from the Latin, and it simply means fellowship. This is a moment of restored fellowship for IFC International. We have become experts overnight, as you know, in using our computers to stay in touch when we've been zooming all over the place. And so for those of our family who are not with us here at Caux, but would join us through the internet right now, wherever you are, we are so glad to have you part of this fellowship. A thank you to the Hub team that kept us together. And thank you for all those behind the scenes that make it possible for us to share this mountain experience with our friends across the world. There is something quite biblical about going up the mountain to find our purpose and refocus our mission. Moses went up the mountain and came down with the Torah. Abraham went up the mountain and came back having experienced the miraculous grace of God, which our Muslim friends only last week celebrated in Eid al-Adha. Jesus went up to the mountain frequently to seek guidance from God. And on one occasion, the transfiguration happened. We have come up this mountain seeking renewal of our mission and our purpose as IFC International. When Moses descended, having encountered God, his face was so resplendent with the grace on his face, people had observed and looked up to him and realized that something had happened. And after these days of refreshing, my friends, we shall have to descend down to the valley and go to our homes all over the world. And that is when the real benefit of these days will be seen and experienced by those who meet us. We see it on our faces, in our lives, our colleagues at work, our leaders in the various national bodies that you represent, our neighborhoods. To be blessed in this way and not go out and make a difference for good is actually an expensive self-indulgence. We have come here to find our purpose and our mission, to get clarity of how to use our lives. We've come here to live and try to inspire our neighborhood and to make our world a better place. And may you and I be found faithful to that call. I welcome you all to this conference, and I hope we will get to know each other better by the end of these few days. Thank you very much.
Well, welcome from Caux Initiatives of Change as well. By the number in front of me, I can, and people from the other room and online, I think we can truly call this a success. The teams of International and Switzerland have been working tirelessly for months and months to secure your presence and secure your attention today. But this is not really the success of the organizers. For me, this is the success of a movement who continues to inspire and whose actions continue to resonate and make an impact on this world. So climate change, population displacement, scarcity of public goods, and the pandemic, coupled with conflicts around the world, have shown that we are actually all interconnected. And these global challenges are daunting and seem to grow by the day. It is hard not to question whether our global governance system is fit for purpose, and it is hard not to feel completely helpless. So at Initiatives of Change, we bring you down to the individual level, a level that is within each person's reach. Change starts with oneself, and if you internalize this, you bring change not only to yourself, but to your family, as many of the families around, to the community, to the country, to the region, and then to the global level. So for us in Switzerland, a neutral country, relatively spared from the horrors that are taking place in the east, the influx of refugees from the south, and some of the racial tensions that we see on the other side of the Atlantic, we can be seen as an oasis of peace. But precisely because of this sentiment, Switzerland has for decades supported the development of tools and processes to uphold human rights, to maintain peace, meet refugees and migrant needs, and regulate the environment. So this work is partly done by international organization at the other side of the lake, and partly done by a multitude of civil society actors in Switzerland, and also by our Swiss authorities, to whom I would like to extend a special thank you for the support they have given us for many years. So the Caux Foundation operates squarely within this cosmos of actors and issues in Switzerland. And last year we opened a small representation office 5 minutes away from the United Nations office. And we work, Ignacio work and his team work, every day to find synergies and develop programs with organizations that find in our approach a complement to theirs. Partnerships are at the heart of what we do, and I hope that these next days will be moments for us to build new relations. But the opening of this small representation office, in fact, coincided with a very important launch of our new foundation strategy, which we call the Caux Transformative Experience. And at the heart of this strategy is the concept of hospitality for change. And that means hosting the network like today and others, but also other groups who would like to come up the mountain, as Gerald was mentioning, to get a glimpse of the IOSC approach and, of course, the region, which I hope that every one of you will have a chance to discover in the next days. So we celebrated our 75th anniversary last year during COVID, and we did not have time to physically rejoice together. So we put together a wonderful book, 75-year anniversary book, which I hope will be dedicated during the week, but you're more than welcome to obtain at the reception later on. And I hope this book, and I hope our discussions today and in the days to come will continue this long tradition of gatherings in Caux for the next 75 years. Before giving you the floor back, Ignacio, I know time is short, but I really want to give my thanks to everyone who made this special day possible and the next few days possible. There are so many, I can't name them all, but if each one of you can say a special thank you each day to somebody who's of service to you, I think they would totally appreciate that, and I would like to give them a big applause.
Recently, Jacqueline and Gerald, they left their successful careers. I'm not quite sure what they jumped into as becoming presidents of IFC International, IFC Switzerland. But what I've seen is that your commitment and contributions to initiative of change are immense and led with a lot of humility, and really want to thank you for that. And we're at the beginning of something else. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, adopted 75 years ago, followed the atrocities of World War II, which caused estimated 50 to 56 million, with an estimate 19 to 28 million deaths from war-related disease and famine. And from the last edition of the Democracy Index, less than half of the world's population live in a democracy of some sort, and more than 1/3 live under authoritarian rule. Today, more than 50 active conflicts rage worldwide, while almost half of the conflicts since 1989 have recurred. International governance and cooperation, and challenged by threats from climate change, large-scale violations of human rights and humanitarian law, and by political violence and polarization. Communal conflicts are the dominant form of non-state violence of the world's regions. Africa has the highest number of non-state conflicts. I would like to invite all of us to stand for a moment of silence, to show respect for all these people who have become victims of brutal conflicts, conflicts that never should have started. Thank you. In silence, we can slow down, take time, and just be. Silent reflection is one of the key elements of initiatives of change. And learning to become quiet helps us refrain from having that hamster in our head. You know, I still have so much to learn. And without much transition, let's dive into where there is a place in the world. The Caux Palace in Switzerland, the Le Mans, the Alps. The Caux Forum 2023 will take place in person in this inspiring setting from 17th to 26th of July 2023.
You arrive here and you can just feel this extraordinary space that the building offers, but also that the space that has been created by, I think, many generations ahead of us that were here and have been doing the same thing. So you step into a community that is quite unlike any other. If you come here, you will make invaluable contacts with people outside of your existing network that can propel your specific passion or project that you have into totally new fields or dimensions that you've never thought possible.
I'm very excited about the Caux Forum happening this year on healing the wounds of the past, because it's a space for people to really come and have these absolutely important conversations and see how we can help each other and help the world heal. We cannot talk about healing without really talking about forgiveness, without talking about trust building, without talking about reconciliation, even without talking about justice.
Democracy is quintessential for the individual and collective freedom of, the freedom from, and the freedom to. Trust and integrity are the catalysts that can stimulate the revival of democracy. The Forum on Trust and Integrity in Democracy will provide a stretching yet compassionate context to spur individual reflection, collective inquiry, and honest dialogues.
leave one's daily life, come to this breathtaking place, interact with people whose stories are magnificently inspiring, frees the mind to be creative and to think about new ways to solve problems.
Now it is my very great pleasure to invite Mrs. Rea Gehring to give an opening speech. Mrs. Rea Gehring is Minister and Deputy Head of the Peace and Human Rights Division at the Swiss Federal Department of Foreign Affairs. And Ms. Gehring will give the perspectives on the role of Switzerland that has played and continues to play in strengthening democracy and supporting individual and national journeys from trauma to trust. Most welcome.
Dear organizers of the CoForum, honorable guests. First and foremost, I would like to thank Initiatives of Change for the great privilege of opening this year's forum that touches upon two very relevant topics, dealing with the past and democracy. It is truly a pleasure to be here today, and it's an honor to welcome all of you attending the CoForum 2023 on behalf of the Swiss Federal Department of Foreign Affairs. After several years of virtual interaction, we have the opportunity to meet in person again this year. Caux is a very unique place. By that, I do not only mean the spectacular surroundings, which you can barely see, and the imposing mountains, but specifically the platform and network built and cultivated by Initiatives of Change over the years. The annual forum brings together activists, government officials, parliamentarians, and private sector leaders, you from all over the world. Thereby, Initiatives of Change has established a diverse and creative platform to explore how we can optimize collective action through our individual efforts. We are proud to have supported it for the past 15 years. Against the backdrop of the current state of global affairs, including the COVID-19 pandemic, Russia's attack on Ukraine, the violent crackdown on demonstrations in Iran, and the resurgent conflict in Sudan, this year's theme couldn't be timelier. We find ourselves in a time where divisions among people have grown deeper. Trust in political institutions is eroding, and democratic principles and values are under threat. Wars and conflicts all around the world have left indelible scars and continue to cause immense hurt and damage today. How can we as individuals, but also collectively, overcome past atrocities and help societies rebuild, repair, and reconcile? One critically important element to prevent conflict and violence from reoccurring, in fact, to prevent conflict from happening in the first place, is inclusive and representative political participation, in short, democracy. Given democracy's many benefits, proven and confirmed in studies, we have to ask ourselves how we can support the restoration of trust in democratic institutions and practices. As you see, both themes of this year's forum, healing the wounds of the past and trust and integrity in democracy, are very closely interlinked and have critical questions at their core, both dealing with the past and the support of for democracies are important pillars of the Swiss foreign policy. Massive violations of human rights, whether as a result of armed conflict or authoritarian repression cause lasting hurt and damage to societies on many levels. While there is no blueprint to overcome such traumatic legacies, and while each situation is distinct, valuable lessons have been learned from experiences in societies as different as South Sudan and Northern Ireland, which you will hear about in sessions later today. What appears to be central is the meaningful participation of victims in all stages of what should be a holistic process. And this holistic process comprises 4 crucial elements. First, truth. Justice second. Third, reparations. And fourth, reforms to prevent reoccurrence. We in Switzerland have a specific entity in my division called Dealing with the Past that supports countries at their request to design and implement processes based on these fundamental 4 pillars. I am pleased to see that there are sessions devoted to this approach on this week's program. As you know, Switzerland is often cited as one of the world's most preeminent practitioners of direct democracy. Although we have a long-standing tradition of direct democracy, and our democracy has also been a result of war and conflict. While today Swiss democratic exceptionalism is sometimes overhyped and certainly has some mythical features to it, our democracy works. As a multilingual and multicultural country, Switzerland understands the importance of civic values that underpin democracy. Accordingly, our political institutions are founded on constant dialogue and compromise. In no other country of the world, citizens are asked to vote so often on the federal, cantonal, and municipal level. Moreover, Switzerland puts a specific emphasis on democracy as government not only for, but by the people. Today, democracy is very much anchored and at the core of Swiss values and identity. For Switzerland, the promotion of democracy and democratic norms goes beyond national borders. Switzerland has a constitutional mandate to protect and promote democracy abroad. Indeed, democracy promotion is at the heart of the Swiss domestic and foreign policy. We are convinced that democracy is essential for peace, political stability, and socio-economic development. And to address today's critical issues of overcoming the damage of conflict and meaningful promoting democracy, Caux provides an exceptional setting. It allows us to see beyond geopolitical rivalries and polarization. It gives us the space to think, exchange views, and develop new lines of action. Caux connects individual and collective action and thus fills a gap in the current landscape of global efforts for peace and democracy. Ladies and gentlemen, with this, I wish everyone a fulfilling and enriching forum. I am sure that this place, fellow participants, and esteemed speakers will inspire you to find innovative ways to strengthen democracy and pave the way from trauma to trust. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Gehring. I thought that was a fantastic opening speech, and Jacqueline and Gerald too. It's not because I'm saying. I would want to say yes. Sorry, I understand. When I switch off from there, I have to really. Okay, I got the technical thing of it, and I understand what you were meaning then, sir. Yeah, I would say yes. And thank you, Mrs. Gehring. I really appreciate the role that you value for Caux. Caux as a safe place, Caux as filling a gap, Caux as a convener of neutral and discrete dialogue, Caux offering a unique collaborative advantage. Thank you for that. And yes, meeting the global and security challenges of this era calls for new forms of engagement and partnership. And yes, we must recalibrate to address the mounting challenges, and we're going to explore this further with a keynote followed by the panel discussion. But really, to highlight that Switzerland is also non-permanent, has a non-permanent seat at the Security Council for another 18 months. And this furthers the Swiss government's commitment, but also our commitment as Swiss citizens to peace and security within the UN and globally. I would like to invite Mrs. Elena Zemkova for the keynote. Mrs. Elena Zemkova is co-founder and executive director of Memorial. The human rights organization Memorial was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for 2022, together with human rights advocate Ales Bieletsky from Belarus and the Ukrainian human rights organization Center for Civil Liberties. Memorial is based on the notion that confronting past crimes is essential in preventing new ones. Founded in 1987, and we would hear more from Mrs. Elena Zemkova, founded by the Nobel Peace Prize laureate Andrei Sakharov. Memorial has spent 30 years working across Russia, but also in several other European cities to compile a history of mass atrocities and political repression. And after the collapse of the Soviet Union, Memorial grew to become the largest human rights organization in Russia. And it was dissolved in 2022 by decision of the Russian authorities. And its documentation center was closed. Memorial has become one of the great moral instances of resistance in the face of the Russian invasion of Ukraine and in the face of the authoritarian excesses of the Kremlin. Please, I would welcome you, Mrs. Elena Zemkova.
On February 24th, 2022, there began a massive armed attack by the Russian Federation in Ukraine. And until the 30th of June this year, the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights has documented 25,170 civilian casualties in 1,504 populated areas of Ukraine, including 9,177 killed and 15,993 persons injured. I give you these figures from the very beginning because we should not forget that we are at war, that the war is happening and people are getting killed. And these figures are not exhaustive. Some names are still unknown to us. Not all can be named. But every name must be found and spoken. People have the right to memory. They have the right to a name. And we grieve for everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, Your Royal Highnesses, Ambassadors, Ministers, dear friends, I thank you for the honor of speaking before you. I am glad to be here with you today. Like my colleagues before me, I cannot name everyone here who helped to organize this grand event. I don't know many of you, but I am very grateful to Gerald Pillay, Jacqueline, Coté. I am grateful to Ms. Gehring, to Nick Foster, Ignacio Parker. Thank you all, to everyone who has helped us to meet here. I'm very happy that this meeting will help us expand our network of friends, and it's very important nowadays. I perceive the invitation to speak here as an expression of interest, support, and solidarity with the work of Memorial and the many thousands of people collaborating with it. The fact that you hear me today is the direct support of our work. Thank you very much for it. Allow me a personal example. I'm just over 60 years old, born in 1961. Back then, it was the Soviet Union. I finished school with top honors in 1978. I graduated from university in 1983 with flying colors. I have a background in mathematics, meaning calculations, scientific papers, and publications. My career revolved around them. I was deeply passionate about my scientific research. What they call now, I was a very promising and accomplished young scientist. Did I consider the USSR an empire of evil? No. Why? Well, I can't say anything. I simply did not think about it. I enthusiastically engaged in pure science. What was important to me? There was no war. I lived in peacetime. I thought so, at least. I knew the history of the Second World War very well, only because many members of my family personally suffered from the Second World War. Some of them were killed, they fought in the war, they were imprisoned, so I knew that. And I thought that people were not killed when I was born, and that was enough for me. Then came 1985. I was under 30, the time of perestroika, the time when it was possible to speak openly. Every day brought news. In the morning, the news agents sell a lot of magazines, a lot of newspapers. Every day revealed the truth, the terrible truth, the truth that even though there was no war, people were being killed and continue to be killed in peacetime. Rights and laws are being violated. People are being killed and persecuted illegally for political reasons. It quickly became clear to me that we were not talking about isolated cases, not about individuals. We were talking about millions of arrests, millions sent to camps, hundreds of thousands executed, hundreds of thousands dying in camps from unbearable labor, millions dying from artificial hunger. Today, for 30 years, the memorial has been compiling lists of victims, and now, after 30 years of work, we can document more than millions, or rather 11 million direct victims of Soviet repressions. I emphasize again, these are not exhaustive figures. Even after 30 years of painstaking work by many hundreds of people, we cannot yet name every name. Well, so far. But we want to preserve and must name each of them. Each of these discarded, excluded people had a family, parents, siblings, spouses. Some of them had children. They loved someone and someone loved them. I am a mathematician. Simple calculations show that not fewer than 11 to 20 million people were directly affected by repressions in the Soviet Union, together with their family members, no fewer than 50 million. Back then, there were about 250 million people living in the USSR. It means that every fifth person fell into the clutches of repression. Then the question is, where are their descendants, their children and grandchildren? Why are they silent? Why have not I heard their voices? I'm successful and intelligent. Well, I thought so, that with my youthful arrogance, I thought that I was so successful and so smart. Why did not I know about them? Why did this terrible truth only reveal itself to me in the late 1980s with the advent of glasnost, when we could speak about it? Did I really know nothing? Did I not see anything? Or did I not want to know? Perhaps it was convenient for me. Believe me, even now, after 35 years, I can still vividly recall the intense confusion and disappointment I experienced in myself, how strong the feeling of awkwardness, shame towards these people, the desire to do something for them. I'm confident that each of us, ordinary people, people that have convened here in this hall, perhaps each of you sitting here has faced at some point uncomfortable and painful questions. How could it happen that I did not see the evil being committed against people? How can the country to which I belong be so unjust, cruel, criminal? I am sure that these same questions will arise sooner or later for many citizens of Russia who today turn a blind eye to the evil being done in their name. There is evil, the war is happening, and the search for personal answers to these questions will be difficult and painful, but it must be done. A challenging and long journey lies ahead. In 1987, Memorial emerged from the search for answers to such questions. I completely changed my life, stopped doing mathematics. There was a meaningful and useful cause for the people. I was among the founders of Memorial, and I'm proud of that. Since its establishment in 1987, during the late Soviet era, Memorial has been a citizens' movement for the truth about the tragic Soviet past and the protection of human rights. One of the Memorial's key missions throughout its history is to combat collective amnesia, to tell the story of repression and resistance to totalitarianism, to restore historical truth and memory. By telling the story of a difficult, terrible past, Memorial fought and continues to fight to prevent the repetition of repression and lawlessness. By highlighting the individual in the history of the 20th century, Memorial consistently upholds the value of every human life today. In recognition of the importance of this work, Memorial was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 2022. I learned about our Nobel Peace Prize on the 7th of October in Tbilisi, Georgia. I was in a taxi. I was on my way to the opening of the exhibition called Daddy's Letters. The exhibition tells the stories of people who perished in Stalin's camps and how they managed to send letters to their children who knew nothing about their fate and suffering. So I'm very grateful, actually, that to the Swiss government that supported this work. It was our joint project. And that exhibition was very successful in many countries. Unfortunately, not in Switzerland so far, but in October 22, it finally opened in Georgia. On the same day, on the 7th of October, in the depths of Russia, in the Komi Republic, my colleagues opened another exhibition, the right to correspondence. It is another memorial exhibition about the fate of Soviet prisoners, but mainly about how human connections are maintained even in the harshest conditions despite the state's efforts. Another event took place on the 7th of October, and that was very daunting and was worrying me a lot. We were awaiting a Russian court decision. It happened. And the court, and we know about this decision now, I did not about it then, but the court decided to seize Memorial's house in Moscow. Just for you to understand, we raised private donations from around the world to purchase the house. The world understood and supported us. We raised $3 million. It was donation by donation, little by little, and we managed to buy this house at the center of Moscow. We paid all the taxes, we equipped it, we furnished it, and it was a warm house. It was the house of truth, the house of human rights. It was an important location on the map of Moscow, on the map of Russia, and on the map of the world. There have been years of research, exhibitions, conferences, seminars, and schools for young scholars. It housed unique and open archives, museums, and libraries. However, the Russian court, contrary to existing laws, decided that if an organization is liquidated, all its lawfully acquired property now belongs to the state. The law ceased to work. Life sometimes gives us surprisingly symbolic signs. So it was only one day, the 7th of October 2022. Only one day in the life of Memorial. 2 exhibitions opened in 2 countries, Russia and Georgia. We received 1 Nobel Peace Prize and 1 house was seized. We repeatedly ask ourselves the question, why such a stark contrast between the hostile attitude of the Russian authorities toward the work of Memorial and the recognition of Memorial's merits in the world? Why is the Russian government aggressive and cruel towards ordinary people engaged in history, defending the dignity and personal rights of ordinary citizens? This aggression and cruelty are not only directed towards us. Why, for the past 20 years, has the Russian government systematically and consistently restricted the opportunities of civil society, resorting to legal persecution, administrative coercion, and recently open acts of violence? Why is it aggressive and cruel towards people who are openly, vocally, peacefully, and without weapons, doing their work for the benefit of ordinary people, relying solely on their faith in law and conviction in the power of truth? I have mentioned before and will repeat, I believe the reason lies in the fact that the Russian government has once again placed itself above society, prioritizing the idea of the state over human rights. This distorted hierarchy of values inevitably leads to the suppression of civil liberties and repression against dissenters. And I can say this not only towards about the Russian government. This risk is everywhere. We all should remember about this risk. Recent events have once again demonstrated that violence and injustice towards one's own people and society, the desperate desire of the ruling elite to retain power at all costs, invariably results in external aggression. And for me, for Memorial, we see a clear connection between internal repression and external violence. In the ongoing 1.5 years of the military catastrophe, peaceful civilians continue to be killed. And we need to keep underlying this connection. Peaceful civilians continue to be killed, cities and villages destroyed, and for 1.5 years, the fragile fabric of peaceful life torn apart. And people in Russia who say no continue to be repressed, but little by little they keep saying no. Within Memorial, there are historians who can provide examples. War thrives on lies, deprives individuals of rights, and suppresses their identities. In the face of this catastrophe, can we seek answers to questions such as, how can we strengthen democracy? How can we find a path from trauma to understanding, and from understanding to trust? Is it the right time for honesty and truth about the distant past? How can we be held accountable for the wounds of the past if the evil was committed long ago and not by us? Is it the right time? Memorial's people firmly believe that it is our duty to search for answers to these questions. As the brilliant Russian political analyst Maxim Trudolubov said, Soviet heritage is not just material for historians, it is the foundation on which the country stands and acts. This is important. The past is the foundation for what's happening now. Unless we relive the past and understand the past, it becomes the foundation of bad actions. If we want the past to release us from its captivity, and we do, we need the complete truth, unadorned and unedited, the entire truth about the past. We must know what happened, when it happened, and how it happened. We need details and specifics. We need names and fates. If we do not know the truth about the past, if we allow forgetfulness, and even worse, justify recent crimes, we once again follow the path of subordinating history to the task of today's politics, reopening the way to state violence. In 2023, propaganda among school children and students intensified in Russia. The state tightly monopolizes education and introduces special classes, propagating xenophobic ideas. Teachers who speak out against war are expelled from schools. Uniform textbooks created not by professionals, but by propagandists with a nationalist agenda have been introduced in schools. The Russian state has devoted enormous resources to this task. Thousands of education and science professionals have been forced to leave the country or have lost their jobs. We all need answers to this. Alternative sources of education and enlightenment are needed to address this. Despite Memorial's formal liquidation in Russia in 2022 and the continued immense pressure on the remaining activists, historians and human rights defenders, and I would like to underline that people are still there and they continue work. Nevertheless, the work of Memorial has become even more important. It is crucial to create new educational, enlightening, scientific, and media platforms that spread the values championed by Memorial. The work of Memorial must undoubtedly continue.
Специалисты, коллекции, архивы важно перевести в формат передачи навыков и знаний. Уникальный опыт мемориала в исследовании прошлого важен для всего мира. Необходимо транслировать широким аудиториям России и других стран. Нобелевская премия показала всему миру важность работы мемориала и в то же время наложила особую ответственность.
Nobel Peace Prize has shown the world the importance of Memorial's work. The Nobel Peace Prize has shown the world the importance of Memorial's work, but it has also placed a special responsibility on us in terms of finding new forms of work and expanding its reach to larger audiences. The Nobel Peace Prize is only an advance that we have received to intensify our work. We, with this Nobel Prize, we got a sort of big microphone, and we started doubting what can we say, and it's a very great responsibility. The Nobel Peace Prize is only an advance that we have received to intensify our work and carry out our responsibility more diligently. The mission of Memorial is to enable citizens of the world, both Russian-speaking and no Russian-speaking, to learn about the totalitarian legacy of Russia and Europe in the 20th century, and to help understand how authoritarian, totalitarian, and populist regimes use the past for political purposes today. We don't know how to stop the monstrous war unleashed by anti-legal state. We cannot stop the repressions unleashed by the Russian government within Russia. However, we can still create new, vibrant forms that combat propaganda, help people reclaim the truth about their past. Despite everything, today we can create a future that upholds the principles of non-violence, respect for human rights, and the importance of every human life and human history. The principle of the memorial, this is a fact that the person is at the center of everything, and we and everything present, everyone present here, we can do. We can make our contribution, every one of us. And I liked your image of mountain, when we need to climb a mountain together. I don't know if we reach the peak, but I'm sure we will achieve something. Thank you for your attention.
Please, yes. Be seated here, Mrs. Zemkova. Yeah. Oh, yes, sorry, I pinched yours. Yeah. Madame Zemkova, Memorial, you're so impressive in terms of courage and determination. We need the truth. We need the truth. We need the non-edited truth. We need the non-unvarnished truth. Thank you. Thank you very much. And it's my great pleasure to invite two other important figures in the field of conflict prevention and reconciliation to come on stage. Really a great pleasure to have with us today Corinne Mourmal-Vanyan, the Executive Director of the Kofi Annan Foundation, and Mo Blecker, independent advisor and former Special Envoy for Peace and Prevention of Atrocities for the Swiss Federal Department of Foreign Affairs. Please join. I'll put myself at the end. Yeah. Sit there. A cool place here, isn't it? Yeah. I'm impressed by this theater. Look at the audience. Yeah. So this is going to be a short panel discussion. And I'd like to invite first Mrs. Mo Blecker. Actually, we've dropped protocol, so it's.
But Russian translation is.
Yeah.
But I think it was.
Are we okay for the interpretation? Yeah.
Can we try? Hello?
Yeah. Russian channel? Are we okay on the Russian channel?
Yeah.
4?
Yes. 4.
Yeah.
It's okay? 4.
Yeah. Okay. We've dropped the protocol, so we agreed that it would be more Corinne and Elena. And, and Mr. Becker. And yeah, wanted to ask more also in her function of how can a government contribute to healing the past while maintaining this neutral position? What does it mean for democracy?
So I have to take the microphone, I suppose.
Yeah.
Do you hear me? Yeah. Thank you, Ignacio. Good morning, everyone. Spasiba, Elena.
Yeah.
I just had the pleasure to talk with my former colleague, because I'm no more in the government, so I was asking myself, why do they ask me something about governments? So we were commenting about the importance nowadays, particularly, to be consistent with our obligations as government, as state, as human, as citizens, to take risk, to be creative, and to have moral courage. I think what Elena told us, it's all about that. So I thank you for that. It gives us also strength to continue and to continue with you also in our everyday activities. Thank you. So each and all member states of the United Nations share one privilege, I would say. It's the one to be committed to implement domestic, collective, and global obligations. And among them, to fully respect, promote, and implement the UN international covenants regarding human rights, rule of law, humanitarian law, including also the responsibility to prevent genocide and other atrocities, as well as to implement norms and standards against impunity. It's our obligation. A consequence thereof, for example, for 2 decades, is that the United Nations, as an expression of this collective will, can no longer endorse peace agreements which are not including provisions to deal with the legacy of atrocities and or human rights violations, civil, political, social, cultural, and also economic rights. Furthermore, in post-authoritarian, post-violent conflict and or other transitional context, the principles against impunity welcomed by the United Nations in 1997 have become the established norm, and I would say the best practice in dealing with the legacy of the past. And in substance, in synthesis, this means 2 main elements. The acknowledgement of what has happened and its consequences. This is what we understand under the word truth. And taking responsibility to address the consequences thereof. And when dealing with the legacy of atrocity, we have to deal with all dimensions of violence and its dehumanization associated to it. So in each context, and according to the peculiar history, cultural and spiritual values, profile of victims, collective, individuals, nature, material and symbolic, the profile of perpetrators, individual, collective, institutional, the nature of crimes and their consequences, as well as the nature of the transition, the resilient resources in society, dealing with the legacy of the past is dealt with differently. But violence is what we call a total phenomenon that is not only inflicted at interpersonal level, killing people, massacring people, it is also structural, and it's also cultural and ideological, as Elena was describing very well. So what is helpful to know for us in everyday life and for our work is that the principles against impunity are based on the acknowledgement of the rights of victims, society, community, and individuals, as well as on the duties of states in the field of truth, justice, reparations, and creation of conditions for the no recurrence. These are obligations for any member state and rights of victims and society. And it's very helpful for us to know that because we can begin working in whatever circumstances with that. Hence, this is not only the responsibility of a particular state emerging after a period of conflict, of violent conflict, or of authoritarian regime, it is also a duty of any UN member state to support such societies, such states, to enter in negotiated transitions toward peace, democracy, and then, once they are in this transition, to support them in their efforts to achieve the most sustainable transition toward peace, equity, justice, and towards what I call the constructive and peaceful management of diversity. There will be a diversity of narratives. There has always been, but it's possible to exchange peacefully about this different narrative. And this obligation, by the way, is one of the most important obligations for any neutral country, which is the second part of your question. The promotion of peace, human rights prevention, and peaceful cooperation among nations and states. This is also an obligation of us. So violent conflicts or authoritarian regimes de facto provoke ruptures of all kinds between governments and their own civil society, inside civil society, and or between peoples. If we are to heal the wounds of the past, as we say, trust needs to be rebuilt between society and government, between society, government, and state, or between peoples who have suddenly become enemies in the eyes of their neighbors, or vice versa, often artificially, as we know, and often in contradiction with their own history as neighbors. They were good neighbors, and now they are enemies. So the task of such transition is therefore also one of transforming relationship and restoring trust between society and state, or between peoples and nations. Where the monopoly of identity, culture, ideology, and narratives has been imposed, diversity shall then emerge at all levels in this new emerging society where exclusion, injustice has prevailed. The transition to durable peace, democracy, rule of law, equity, and holistic ecology shall be, by essence, a transition towards diversity. This is the biggest challenge nowadays for democracy and peace, worldwide, and not only for societies in conflicts, emerging for conflict or authoritarian regime. It is precisely the constructive management of diversity, our main challenge. And this is also, I believe, the biggest opportunity of our times. Let me now address the issue of neutrality, the second part of your question. Denis de Rougemont, a known figure for some of you living in Switzerland or European, is a Swiss prominent intellectual figure, an advocate of the construction of a Europe understood as a space of cooperation among a diversity of nations and culture. He stated that the mandate of a neutral country is to safeguard a way to see the world, and listen to that, where the rights of individuals and duties towards a community are mutually reinforcing and complementary. This is an immense responsibility, he said, that cannot be forgotten under, and we have heard that quite often lately, under the pretext of realism or under the defense of own domestic interest. This cannot be forgotten. Neutrality can then only be understood as a moral compass that requires a proactive commitment for peace, human rights, equity, prevention, democracy, and cooperation among nations. And to conclude, if we seriously wish to engage in healing the wounds of the past, the how is as important as the what. The how is as important as the what. There is no technical solution to impunity, and there is no vaccination against dehumanization. Dehumanization through war, conflict, extermination of the other as an enemy is the end of civilization, the end of us as human beings, and the end of Mother Earth. The good news is that we can indeed act as humans, as members of one global, diverse community. There are ways to promote acknowledgement of facts and the truth and their consequences, and to take responsibility for them. There are ways to promote rehumanization, to promote equity, co-responsibility, democracy, and diversity. This is, I believe, the highest ethical human duty for each of us and for each member state of the UNN, to promote a world where the strength of a people is measured by the well-being of its weakest member. This is a quote of the preamble of the Swiss Constitution, this neutral country. And I wish to share it with you in a modified form. Let's all together commit to promote a world where the strength of our global community is measured by the well-being of its weakest members. And for that, friends, colleagues, let's be simply courageous, ethical, let's take risk, and let's be creative all together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mo. That question around impunity is certainly, I think, already this afternoon in a number of the discussions we have and in the days to come. There's an epidemic of military coups at the moment. If you look in the last 2 years, successful coups, there have been at least 6 in Africa. We have Myanmar, February 2021. We have the takeover of the Taliban in August 2021 as well. And all your message also of that moral commitment that we have, the moral courage that you were talking about. But certainly that's part of the different discussions that we're going to be having in the next days. Thank you very much, Mo. And I would like to turn now to Corinne from the Kofi Annan Foundation. Kofi Annan has a track record of working with youth. What does it mean in terms of reconciliation with youth when they have nothing to do with whatever has happened, or do they?
Thank you. And first of all, I have to say I'm really, really happy to be here today, because today is Nelson Mandela Day, and I don't think there's a better example of healing the wounds of the past and reconciliation than Nelson Mandela. And the second reason is that Kofi Annan himself was here at the Caux Forum a few years ago, and I feel very, very privileged to be here representing his foundation today. Just an aside, before I respond to your question about the epidemic of a military coup and the weakening of democracy, I would add to that we have seen also near attempted coup in what we thought were established democracies like the US and Brazil. So let's not forget that the democracy is weakening everywhere. In Europe, in the Americas, on all continents, in fact. But to respond to your question, yes, Kofi Annan always said that the mistake in peace efforts was often to consider that young people were either the perpetrators or the victims of violence, but to not see them as positive agents of change and reconciliation. And one thing which we have seen at the foundation is that peace processes take a long time, typically. So a generation that negotiates the peace agreements is not always the generation that's going to implement it. So it's very important to remember in the peace negotiations already to build in the fact that the young people that you may set aside today will actually probably be the ones implementing the peace agreements. And we've seen in Colombia, for instance, that a change in political orientation or whatever, in a new generation coming to power through the ballot box, can impact negatively or positively the implementation of the peace process and reconciliation. And so because of this, as you said, it's important to foster dialogue, not only between the people and their institutions, so vertical dialogues between communities that were at odds, but it's really also important to foster dialogue between generations in making sure that reconciliation happens. So what we have seen as well is that young people, better than politicians, have a capacity to envision the future. Politicians are by nature limited by the electoral cycle, where the young people are able to project themselves in the future, and they must. So they really have a key ability to play an important role in reconciliation efforts. The reality is that some of them have only known violence. Many of them have been born in some countries. Conflict has been going on for 20, 30 years. So many of them have known only violence. So you need to give them the ability, you need to help them envision the future in a peaceful way. And that's difficult sometimes. So what also we've seen is that the traditional institutions, political institutions, religious institutions, educational institutions, social institutions, have lost credibility in the eyes of many young people. So you need to reach the young people through innovative methods, and you were talking, Moby, about taking risk and being innovative. So what we've tried to do at the foundation in various contexts is use very innovative methods that we think reach the young people better, to involve them in peace building and reconciliation efforts. I mean, we have a program which is called Extremely Together for the Prevention of Violent Extremism. And this program has typically, and that works only with young people. This program has typically used, theater, music to bring young people from diverse communities together. And it's worked very well. And that's from Pakistan to the Philippines to Uganda. We have also used, at the moment, we have a program in Colombia for reconciliation through music with children and young people. And through these children and young people, we reach their parents and their communities by bringing them, they just compose music together. So I've talked to people who sometimes, very frankly, have a sort of hardcore approach to peace and security and snigger at such soft approaches. But what we have seen is because of the disconnect between young people and many of the institutions, these soft approaches actually work best. For instance, even we have partners in Somalia, and this is a society, I was talking of countries that have known conflict for a very, very long time. We have partners in Somalia that use sports to bring young people together and help them overcome the mental trauma of war. And this is one issue that I wanted to discuss a little bit also is what we have seen is the fact that even when young people have not been the perpetrators, even when they've been very passive or children during conflicts, the reality of transgeneration trauma, of conflict trauma is very important and is often not understood. The World Health Organization assesses that about 22% on average, but over a fifth of people in post-conflict settings have mental health disorders, anxiety, depression, PTSD, schizophrenia, a lot of mental health conditions in post-conflict settings. And if you have to create safe spaces for young people to be able to talk about their own mental health trauma, especially sometimes they feel they didn't they didn't live through the war, or they were not so affected because they were only children, and they don't dare speak about it. But it's very important for them to recognize in a safe space that they have inherited some of the traumas of to be able to build and to build and go forward. This is important. And I just want to say, and this has happened very well in Northern Ireland. And a few years ago, the foundation issued a report which is available on our website, which is called Challenging the Conventional, Making Post-Violence Reconciliation Succeed. And one of the case studies, there are four case studies in there, and one of the case studies about Northern Ireland and how some organizations are working on the trauma-related psychological problems linked directly to the conflict. And I just want to say a few words about Ukraine here, especially since Elena is here. But you have to think about young people today in Ukraine. They constitute 50% of the armed forces, of course. In the army, it's mostly the young people that go, mostly young men. They are also at the forefront of all the volunteering effort, civil protection, humanitarian assistance, etc. But also a lot of young people are displaced. Out of 10 million young people, children and young people, it's assessed that about 40% are displaced, 2 million internally and 2 million as refugees. And you have to start to think now, to work now on the post-conflict Ukraine, because we all hope that this will come very fast. But we have to start working now with these young people, because there has to be an incentive for them to come back and rebuild the country. And it's very risky if you ask a lot of young people in sacrifices during a conflict, but you ignore them once the conflict is done and everyone goes back to their place, and young people go back to their schools, many of which have been destroyed, and we forget that they took such an important role during the conflict and that they have so much to bring to the reconstruction of the country. So I would say, and to reconciliation and to healing. I mean, they will be, this is a generation of young people that will be profoundly wounded. So how do you heal this? You have to start working on it now. So I think I'll stop here for now. But yes, for us, this is one of our areas of focus, is really how to bring young people in processes of reconciliation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Corinne, with some very concrete examples from, well, you named them, Colombia, Pakistan, Uganda, Philippines. There's one I was reading about that attracted my attention, is your support to the Elman Peace Center, using the combination of surf and yoga. So I wanted to know, Adrian, can we organize in one way? Yoga is okay, surf. Is there a way of organizing surf in the Caux Palace? Yeah? Yeah, he says yes. So next year we would have surf in the Caux Palace, no? And Denise, that would be good. You do the yoga, I'll do the surf, no? Denise is my wife, by the way. We share things at home. And I'd like to move to you then, Elena, because as you described it, we're witnessing such a growing civil unrest in Russia. There's the war in Ukraine. There's also the dissatisfaction of the population of the war in Ukraine, and also the economic situation in Russia. Where are the ingredients to salvage whatever there is of democratic values?
It is not an easy question. It's very difficult to answer, and we think about it every day. It's the same as in the Second World War. It was clear that Hitler will be gone, but the German people will stay. It's the same here. The war will be gone, will finish, but the people will stay. That's why the first thing I would like to say, I think we should think and act at different levels. One level is that we should try at all costs to protect any remaining democratic institutions that are left. Yes, the law is not working. The court, well, if we take the memorial as example, we can see that the courts are not working. But anyway, we have laws, they are written down. We have a constitution, and I have to draw your attention to that. The Russian constitution still has an article talking about the human rights and the protection of human rights. So we should fight for the remaining democratic institutions, because this is the skeleton. If we destroy this skeleton, then the restoration will be even harder. It will be hard, and everyone understands that. So this is one level. Second level is the international relations. Any opportunity to preserve the international relations, any opportunity to support the people that for some reason are not in Russia, all these opportunities are important, because all these people are our strength. We all understand we need a victory. But people that are outside of Russia, that are against what's happening, is part of our path to victory. Their support is our path to a victory. And the third level, and for me it is very important, it is important to preserve personal relations as much as we can. Because the trust that we're talking about is destroyed very much, especially at a personal level, especially within the same families between Russia and Ukraine. I can say about my family, part of my family lives in Ukraine, and to preserve the trust and understanding is a hard work, and I'm doing it every day. If we speak about people in Russia, it is very important to turn their eye to the past. And why I'm talking about the continuation of our work as memorial. The past in Russia is now a myth about the past. I cannot believe that any common sense person can be nostalgic about victims of repressions, about people that died in camps. But sometimes people are given a myth, a fairy tale about the past, and it has nothing to do with the reality. And we need to bring people back to understanding that the past is difficult, is complicated. And just not to answer the difficult questions is not going to help us. Because if we forget those questions, then we will start doing something bad. So for me, this is part of preserving the democracy. So we need to preserve the institutions, we need to preserve the personal relations, and also the work of memorial. So I will carry on my work.
Thank you very much. I think we could stay until the end of the day listening to more to Corinne and to Elena. We'll continue a little moment, the panel, with the same question to our three panelists, which is perhaps much more personal on the years that you've been working on peace building. And perhaps there is one advice, one reflection, one learning that you would like to share, but having in mind the new leadership that we need. What would that one element be? And if we can be concise, and I know you're staying for longer, so we'll be able to converse also during the rest of the day with you. Yeah, Mo, perhaps.
Well, thank you for your question. I think that what Elena just said is absolutely central. And this is why I also said the what is as important as the how. And what is our vision of victory? You remember this question was raised in Madrid. What is the vision of victory in the situation between Russia and Ukraine? So what is the vision of peace? And if this is a vision based on participatory democracy, constructive management of diversity, every step, and how we resist against dehumanization has somehow to be inhabited by this practice. And as you were saying, the conflicts are long, and getting out of a conflict where an enemy has been created, an us and them, will take generations. So it's, I believe, also our duty, for example, here in Switzerland, to recall the government that the solution has to be democratic, has to be political, and we cannot reduce, for example, the situation in Russia, Ukraine, or in any other space to military solutions. We need to explore other avenues because it's the future of the Russian new generations, the future of Ukrainians, and the future, on one hand. In Colombia, you were quoting Colombia, this practice of democracy is now at the essence of the progress made or not made in the implementation of the peace agreement. In the Philippines, where I was the chair of the Transitional Justice and Reconciliation Commission, the process is stuck precisely because the peace agreement are understood under this very monolithic lens of security, as peace being silencing the weapons. It's not like that. Peace is, again, the reconcilio, the recreation of a community. And in a community, we have diverse voices, diverse needs, diverse narratives, diverse histories, diverse generations. And it's by making every step in this negotiation on how we can build that trajectory towards peace that I believe that we can make progress.
Thank you.
Well, I think you mentioned more about focusing not only on the what, but on the how. When we talk to young people about leadership, we talk to them a lot about the why. So that's why we focus a lot on leadership with ethics. And ethics is not always a very easy concept to understand. If you look at the definition, the dictionary, Merriam-Webster, it would tell you it's a set of moral principles that guide people's behavior. And a lot of people focuses on the first part, which is the set of moral principles. And all of us have grown with a particular set of principles that were handed down to us by our schools, by our parents, by our religious institutions, by our general culture. And so it can actually be quite divisive. So we prefer to focus on how the ethical framework will allow leaders to make the right decisions. And we show that ethics is actually a practical tool. It's an actionable thing. It's not an abstract set of principles. And there is a quote that I like very much by Joel Rosenthal, who's he's the president of the Carnegie Council for Ethics in International Affairs. And it's, at the start, I was thinking, ethics in international affairs. International affairs is anything but ethical. But if you look at the Carnegie Council, they have excellent content. I really recommend it. And this is the quote. He says that ethics is about making the effort to evaluate competing points of views and then truly caring about the impact of the choices you have made. It is not a cure-all for the world's problems, but it's an actual process for finding solutions. So this is a lot of what we say to young people about leadership. And very quickly, I'd like to make a few points about this. So as I said, ethics is not abstract. It is, we live in an area which is a lot of management gurus and others define as the VUCA area, the area of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. So ethics is actually more than ever today, ethics is the way to navigate the uncertainty. Because many of us, including in peace processes, we cannot be sure about the impact of the choices we make. So the only way to go forward and not to be paralyzed because of the uncertainty is to stick to an ethical framework. And then that will help you make the right decisions and navigate sort of the trade-offs inherent in the fact that there are many options. And ethics is also about humility and admitting mistakes. And it's also about taking responsibility, and you talked about taking responsibility as being the way of ending impunity. So having an ethical framework will make you acknowledge the mistakes and take responsibility for your mistakes. And it's fundamentally about respect, which is accepting and treating everyone as humans with dignity and putting humans back at the center, as you said, Elena. And that's really being motivated by the dignity and rights of others. So, and there are many other points that I could make about leading with ethics, because that's one of my favorite subjects. So thank you for asking me the question. But I just want to give one example of someone who always managed and led by ethics, and that was Kofi Annan. If you think of all the things that I said about humility, he acknowledged the shortcomings, his own shortcomings and the mistakes of the UN in Rwanda. Thinking about making difficult choices, he paid very seriously, his family paid for the choice he made to declare the invasion of Iraq illegal in 2003. And what guided him in this decision was definitely his unfailing moral compass. So I just want to say we are lucky at the foundation that we can always rely on his example. But the reality is for young people today to navigate this very uncertain and conflictual world, rely on an ethical framework to guide you. That would be my, yeah.
Это сложная задача давать советы, особенно молодым людям. Я вообще не уверена, что они хотят слушать наши советы. Да и люди вообще, я не уверена, что слушают особенно советы, иначе непонятно, почему они снова и снова совершают такие ошибки. Но поэтому я бы не стала давать советы, но я бы сказала о том, что я сама себе говорю.
I wouldn't advise anything to anyone. For me, it's very important to work on an everyday basis. Every day, I would like to make something concrete and useful. This is first. Second, we have a wall in front of us, and we need to go through it. And what's the rule to go through the walls? First, we need to see the obstacles. And the second, we need to believe in ourselves. And another important thing that I can't stop repeating to myself, we can't take ourselves very seriously. I like people with humor, joyful people, because we have one life. We have to carry it on. We would like to be born in another country. We would like maybe to be blonde or brunette, or maybe be an animal. Whatever in jungle, but we have what we have, and we are weak with all our defaults, but we have to see all these obstacles. We have all our strengths and our weak points, and we have to do something about it. Thank you.
I think we can have really a big round of applause for the three panelists we've had today, Elena, Mo and Corinne. And perhaps I would invite you to to go back into the audience because I think they're going to be moving the tables. Thank you, Elena. And before that, I have to read you the instructions I have on my notes there. Ignacio summarizes some points of the panel discussion. And I have another message coming in here. Be sharp on time at 12 o'clock, you know. So I'm just going to say a few words of a lot that we've had this morning, and almost just buzzwords just to remind you what has been said. Long-term and truth. The ethical framework, the human rights that we have to continue putting at the center of all we do, including a human rights economy. The third, locally led. Fourth, re-establishing trust. Fifth is the element of diversity and inclusion. That sixth point that Mo talked about, the dehumanization. Too often, our level of what we find normal just goes lower and lower. And where is it that we have that anger? And to say, no, this is not normal. Elena's last comments around how we have to believe in ourselves, how we only have one life. And the other one referring to youth, I quite like how the creative leadership youth define youth. Creative leadership is an initiative of change program, which is led by youth. And then when I asked them, but then I can't follow the program. I say, no, we lead the program, but whoever is young in spirit and in heart can join us. Okay? And I think that's absolutely wonderful in terms of how we work intergenerations. What we didn't talk about is the effects of the environment, of climate change on peace and stability. But I'm really very happy now to hand over to Sven. Did I talk enough for you to be? Thank you very much, Sven. That was inspiring, and I think it was a... You're still going. Well, let's keep on in our minds, no? Because that brings us also peace of mind, helps us. Art and conflict. Yeah. Very connected. Yeah. Thank you, Sven. Yeah. Now, we're almost there. The two main elements of the core forum have been developed by the international teams and coordinated by Imad Karam, who heads the international executive of our international body. But I would like to invite for a few words, and I switch to French first, Claude Bourdin. Was that English or French? No. Je voudrais inviter Claude Bourdin, that was French, à venir également avec Margaret Lehmann, hier Erfahrungen für die Zeit in Caux darzulegen. Ja? Was das gut, Margaret?
Herzlichen Dank.
Yeah, many thanks. Hello to everyone. I am very happy to see so many of you, and a warm welcome from the HWPT team in Caux. That means the healing the wounds of the past. After a long period of time, we finally have the opportunity to personally meet at a core forum. Online meetings are fine, but during the pandemic, they had been a huge relief, but we can now do much more. And finally, we have the possibility to connect in a very different way, and we can't just meet personally, but also create a foundation of trust on which we can build. Yeah, maybe we can even manage to gain experience, knowledge, and build strategies and how to create plans and how to have a life in a very sustainable and peaceful way. To manage all this, we have to resolve our past personally, but also in our communities, in our nations. The more and more traumas cause division. Only after overcoming these pains and injuries, we can build a future that also applies amongst us and our relations. In the next 5 days, we will have more than 35 workshops on offer here, and many people can hear how they can personally and in their communities overcome traumas. Christians, Muslim personalities from the Lebanon they can tell us how they got together to resolve conflicts in the Lebanon and beyond. And by the civil war, they did fight against each other. In Somalia, there will be descriptions how in some of the most fought areas had people overcome their pain. And the British, the refugee as peace builders, will be talking about their programs, how they can on the one hand, lead the program in their country, and on the other hand, how they can help to reconstruct their country when they are back in their country. In a world where we have to react to the destruction of the environment through the climate change, let us together here experience all this in Caux to free ourselves from the inner pain, hopefully with a new understanding how traumas and conflicts can be overcome, resolved. Together, let us create a community how sustainability can be worked towards. And very many thanks.
Bonjour.
Hello.
Confiance et intégrité dans la démocratie.
Trust and integrity in democracy. The speakers before me have really explained the reasons why we need this forum and why we need to talk about these topics. So it's with pleasure that I am here today to talk before you. We all should play a role to improve the situation. Initiatives of change has brought about their contributions amongst all of us. We all believe in individual values and trust. We all are contributing to more justice and more unity and more peace. There are going to be 5 plenary sessions, which are going to be a bit different from the previous session, with themes and with people who are going to help us to reflect. We are going to have exchanges with participants as well. These are workshops on very precise topics which are going to target different ideas. This will be an opportunity for you to share your ideas in small groups, to get to know each other and to be inspired by others. Maybe you will even be inspired by your own inner voice. We are creating change so that the world will change. This session is an exercise of democracy. From the very beginning, we have been talking about this. We have got a team of volunteers which is continually growing. These are 3 days full of sessions going up until Sunday evening. We are going to put democracy into place. We're going to talk amongst each other. We are going to talk about common objectives. So you are all invited because you have all got a role to play, and we will see each other again on Sunday evening. Thank you very much.
Certainement un grand merci à Margaret, à Claude.
A very big thank you to Claude, Margaret and Iman, and to everybody who is here today. I think that Claude said it's not just the what, it's the how that we get there. So I would like to thank you all. So I'm going to continue in French now because Nick Foster, he is completely fluent in French now. So I'm now going to invite Nick to come up and to talk to us. He is also a colleague of the Swiss Initiatives of Change.
Ignacio has given me the last word and no time to do the last word. I have some housekeeping to provide. All the people who are workshop leaders, please meet at 300D at 2 p.m. today. We are about to go downstairs to lunch. Lunch is 2 floors down. There may be some competition for spaces, but we hope not. So take your time to go down to the floor. What I would like to do before I leave the stage is to ask you to put your hands together for Ignacio, who did such a magnificent job of facilitating. You can't hear? Oh, I'm sorry. He has a great story about his trainers. If you look at his footwear, he has a great story about his footwear. So ask him about his footwear. And I just want to recognise also, both here in Caux, online, and across the world, that there are people for whom the issues that we have been talking about are real and personal and lived. So I just want to recognise that there are people in pain about the subjects that we are talking about on this stage, and that we need to take very sensitively how we walk alongside them. So if there are people who look as though they're in pain in the building today, there'll be a good reason. And I'd just like to say that we stand with you. Thank you.